let's talk about some books. Hey there, storytellers, welcome back to my channel. Today's video, as you can tell, is going to be my April wrap-up, and it is a short one. I only finished 4 books this month, and 3 of them were audiobook because I've been a busy girl. I had a lot of life changes going on. I left one job, I started a new job, and craziness ensued. So I have not done a lot of reading, I haven't done a lot of writing. I've just been trying to take moments as they come. But anyway, without any further ado, let's get into it. The first book I finished in April is Be More Bee, How to Find Your Buzz by Allison Davies. And I mentioned this in my haul recently. It is a pseudo sort of self-help book / nonfiction book hybrid, wherein it talks about bees. You get facts about how bees are and how they live their lives, so to speak, and how they just bring good into the world. And it gives you tips for how to incorporate those practices, so to speak, into your daily life. I gave this one 5 stars. It is a very adorable, peppy little read. It has beautiful, let me see if I can show you, beautiful little illustrations in there that just make it so cozy and happy. It's perfect for spring or summer, I think, but I did also think that it was something that was useful as a resource for somebody who's sort of looking to improve their happiness, to bring more positivity into their life. I really like the sort of multi-layered format of it. It gives you, like I said, facts about bees and how they affect the world around them, as well as sort of how to cultivate more bees in the world, sort of how you can practice good bee hygiene, if you will, and make the world a more habitable place for our primary pollinators. They are hugely important to the ecosystem and they're in jeopardy. So that is something to take into account, and it is a factor in this book. But I also really like that it gives you that perspective of this is how they do it, and their lives seem so simple, but they're so kind of happy and gentle and meaningful, and here's how you can take that philosophy and put it into your own life and make your life feel more happy and positive and gentle. It's cute, it's simple. I finished it in a day, I think maybe an hour or 2 max, and it's just so cute. Next, I read Vanessa Yu's Magical Paris Tea Shop by Roselle, and this is a sort of contemporary magical realism romance. It follows our main character, Vanessa, who has struggled her whole life with this ability she has to see the future in other people's drinks, basically. It's an ability she's never wanted and never really embraced because she doesn't like it. But she goes to Paris with her aunt, who also shares this ability, in order to learn how to help control and embrace her visions a little bit more when they start becoming more dark and more painful. In Paris, Vanessa pretty much stays consistent about the fact that she doesn't want these visions, and she's also struggling with the fact that she really wants to find love, but she doesn't have a red thread. And that means she doesn't have a soulmate, basically. And according to the lore within this book, it is something that people with the ability to see the future do not have. Of course, like I said, it's a romance, so Vanessa and her aunt go on their own little romantic adventures, as well as sort of grow into their abilities. Vanessa ends up, well, I don't want to spoil it, but Vanessa ends up a little bit different than she started. We'll go with that. In many ways, I should say. And it's a by no means perfect story, but it is pretty feel-good. I ended up giving it 5 stars, even though it wasn't perfect, like I said. Mostly I was reading it because it seemed like a cute feel-good story, which is what I needed at the time. So I gave it 5 stars because it fit the emotional need that I was looking for in a story. But the sort of lore around their powers is iffy in some cases, and it's not a fantasy book, so the author didn't dive into the magic of the world. It's just tidbits of magic woven into our world, and I'm not bothered by that, but it is something to be considerate of if you're thinking about picking it up and that would bother you. The author also spends a lot of time describing food in this story. The main character is a foodie, and I have a suspicion that Roselle is a foodie as well, but I personally wasn't bothered. I was hungry many a time because she was describing food in such great detail, but I was not bothered by the extensive descriptions. Listening to it, I feel like I got through that content a lot faster. The food descriptions, the descriptions of the atmosphere and the setting and stuff were definitely pretty extensive, so if that bothers you, again, just something to note. I wasn't in the audiobook. I listen at double speed, so I often don't notice things like that if they slow down the pacing or not, because I force the pace to be fast either way, so it could potentially slow it down. I can't say for sure, but like I said, something to note. And because it is a romance, it's not really my bag. I like the sort of subplot of a romance, and in a way it was and it wasn't a subplot. It was only because Vanessa struggled hard, but it was ultimately her main goal as a character. So it was kind of the main plot, and I didn't really care for it. I was very interested in her aunt's story. Her aunt seemed like she had an interesting background and a more interesting romance, so I kind of was more interested in her, but Vanessa was a little bit frustrating. The guy she was sort of matched with was a little bit frustrating. Actually, he was a lot of bit frustrating. I didn't love him. I didn't quite get why Vanessa was so hooked, especially because it was pretty insta-lovey, and that was not really it for me. Like, they had their challenges. Some were kind of manufactured and some were relatively natural, so it was kind of a mixed bag there, but Vanessa's particular romance was not the highlight of the story for me. I liked her aunt and I liked the food descriptions, and ultimately when Vanessa and her beau weren't being challenging, they were, I suppose, kind of enjoyable. Like I said, it was pretty feel-good. It wasn't too complex. It wasn't this mind-blowingly deep story. It was just feel good, and that's what I needed at the time. Next, we have She's Too Pretty to Burn by Wendy Hurd, and this is a YA contemporary retelling of The Picture of Dorian Gray. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest and start off with the fact that I have not read Dorian Gray, so I don't have the original manuscript, so to speak, to hold this up against. I don't know what's sort of a good match beat for beat and what wasn't. So just total openness there. That being said, I did give it 4 stars. I didn't think it was poorly done by any means. It was a fairly enjoyable story. The characters are all kind of unlikable, but I get the vibe that that's how they are in Dorian Gray as well. So I think that was something that was intentional because of how they are. So that was probably executed pretty well. And the story was told in first-person perspective. So it opens with the perspective of Mick, who I think is our sort of Dorian Gray figure. Not positive. Don't quote me on that. And Mick is somebody who is kind of the beautiful, but she doesn't know it kind of character. And she has a really toxic relationship with her mother, and Mick hates being photographed. It makes her physically ill. She does not want it. She does not like it. She, in fact, has falling outs with her sort of old friends. Because of it, all Mick wants to do is focus on swimming. Then we have Veronica, who is a photographer, and we get her perspective shortly after Mick's. She is sort of bored with her life and her subject matter and looking for a change, and Mick comes along and kind of shakes the things up for her, and she gets kind of obsessed with taking Mick's picture, even though she knows Mick doesn't like it. And then we have Veronica's best friend, Nico, who is a chaotic performance art guy. And Nico is possibly the darkest figure in this whole book. His perspective comes in right near the end, and I wish we had gotten more of it because I would have loved to pick apart his psyche. Let me tell you. My friend says that Nico parallels a character from Dorian Gray that comes in near the end of Dorian Gray, so I guess that's where we have that overlap, but I do wish we had more of Nico's perspective just because I would have, like I said, loved to pick his brain. So as Veronica gets more obsessed with taking Mick's picture and Mick falls more into the world of Veronica and Nico. They all kind of get entangled with each other and they start pushing the boundaries. They do some pretty heinous things. Nico, like I said, is kind of the worst of all of them. And there's just this weird underlying dynamic between the three of them where they're all kind of simultaneously jealous and obsessed with one another. And it just plays out in such a dramatic way. Like I said, I can't compare it to Dorian Gray because I haven't read it, but from the vibe I got and from some of the reviews I saw, it was more of an inspired by Dorian Gray kind of story rather than a faithful beat for beat kind of retelling, but like I said, I can't speak to that for sure. And last but not least, I read Shibit by Britta Lundin, and this is a YA contemporary LGBT plus romance. This follows our main character Claire, who is a fan fiction writer for a show called Demon Heart, and she has a pretty substantial following. So one day when she learns that Demon Heart is coming to her town, she convinces her mother to take her to the con, and she gets up in front of everybody and asks a question about her ship. It is a gay ship between the two main characters of Demon Heart, Smokey and Heart. Heart, who is the demon, hence Demon Heart, because he's a demon with the heart, you get it. And it makes one of the main actors, the actor who plays Smokey, very uncomfortable, and he kind of creates a PR mess by calling her crazy into the microphone that he has not covered very well. And she gets embarrassed, she runs out, but long story short, to fix their PR mess, she gets invited to go on the con circuit with them, wherein she sort of learns to discover herself and her sexuality, as well as helping this actor become more open-minded toward shipping of characters in general, because he starts out thinking that shipping itself is crazy, and then even he starts to see the chemistry between the characters, and he starts to see what they're reading into the subtext that he himself is acting out on screen. He just didn't think about it that much. So it's kind of a crazy but really fun story about this girl who just loves the show and is just trying to create fan fiction to sort of make the characters fit the mold that she wants to see for characters. She wants some representation for people like herself and for people like the girl she has a crush on and other people who are gay or queer or LGBT plus in any way. She wants to see better and she wants to see more diversity, and so it's the story of a girl asking for more of a show, and I really thought it was very cute. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't a totally perfect story because we had to go on this character growth journey with one of them in terms of being more open-minded. There were some moments that were a little icky in terms of discussing representation, but it was ultimately to get to the point where he's more open-minded and more accepting. So it served a purpose, but it was just a little icky to slog through, especially because his perspective and Claire's perspective are both given in first person, so you are kind of getting their internal monologues as they're reacting to things and what they're feeling and doing and why, and it's good. I love that. I love first person because I like to get all those details, but sometimes it does become a little bit uncomfortable. I would like to clarify my note on the character who I said was a little bit icky getting through his thoughts. To be perfectly accurate, he never says anything outright homophobic or transphobic or anything like that. He's just a little closed-minded about himself and his own character, and he's just sort of learning that his interpretation of something is not the only right one, and that it's okay to let fans interpret characters as they will. So it was only a little bit icky because he was very staunchly against certain things, and it took a while for him to come around, and that was what was uncomfortable to get through. To be honest, I gave it 4 stars, but the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. So I don't know that I'll change the rating because I haven't fully formulated my thoughts on it, but I do really like it, and I'm considering buying a copy because it's right up there with stories like Fangirl and Eliza and Her Monsters, both of whom are about, you know, Fangirl's about a fangirl, and Eliza and Her Monsters is about a creator of an online comic who kind of has her own following and her own fan fiction writers, people who write fan fiction of her content, and Shibit just kind of gave me those vibes, and those are some of my most treasured feel-good stories. I have reread them when I kind of need that boost, and I'm considering adding Shibit to that rotation. But that is it for the books I read in April. Not too many, but the ones that I did read, I personally enjoyed. They were bright spots in otherwise dreary, cloudy April, as well as sort of stressful, changing April for me. So lots of spring growth happening, but they were little bright spots, or at least 3 of them were. She's Too Pretty to Burn was a little bit dark and intense, but it kind of fit the spooky vibe, so it was a-okay in my book. But like I said, that is it. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by leaving a like down below. And have you read any of these books that I mentioned? If you have, let me know your thoughts on them in the comments down below. And if you have any sort of recommendations along the lines of the ones that I enjoyed, you know, anything that fits the similar vibes, let me know those as well, because I'm always on the hunt for good feel-good reads. Trust me, always on the hunt. I have a lot of spooky reads and I have a lot of genre reads, but I don't have ones that are just feel good. So if you have any, let me know. But that is it for this video. If you want to keep up with me and all my bookish adventures, you can go ahead and click the subscribe button. And I do highly recommend that you ring the little bell so that you don't miss a beat. Next week's video is going to be my May journaling spread, and a spoiler alert, I have not been doing a lot of journaling for April, so May is going to be a fresh start for me among many other things. But that is it. I will see you guys next Friday, because I post videos every Friday. Bye!